With operant conditioning, one of the things that you have to remember is it's totally based upon reinforcement. And so today we're going to talk about what we call the schedules of reinforcement. In other words, how often should reinforcement be given? Should it be given every single time that someone does the correct behavior, or do you occasionally give reinforcement? And so again, the difficulty here is simply with the terms. And there are four terms that you're going to have to know. The first two, let's take a look at. Ratio and interval. These are pretty simple, but ratio should remind you of math class. So anytime we hear the word ratio, think of number. Interval, think of time period. For example, you're watching a race and they're talking about the interval between first and second place. In other words, the time period. So ratio equals number, interval equals time period. If you know that, you're halfway here already. So let's take a look at different schedules of reinforcement. Now, again, the question is, should you give reinforcement all the time or just part of the time? If reinforcement occurs every single time that a person emits the correct response, well then what we're talking about is what's called continuous reinforcement. A Mountain Dew machine, okay, pop machine, that would be something based on continuous reinforcement. A parking meter where, automatically, it's going to, every single time you put a coin in a parking meter, you're going to get credit for whatever you put in. Okay, those are continuous reinforcements. Now, the thing about continuous reinforcement is when we talk about extinction, in other words, how quickly will the behavior be lost if reinforcement stops? With continuous reinforcement, you have a problem. Let's say that you've been taught for a pop machine, you put your money in, you hit a button, you get a reward. And that happens every single time you do it. But you go to lunch one day, you put your money in the machine, you hit the button, and you get nothing. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, oh, doggone it, I was hoping to get something, and are you going to just go ahead and put more money in, hoping that the machine works the next time? Probably not. Only freshmen do that. So you're not going to do that. You're going to wait until either an authority figure comes by and says, hey, we fixed it, or maybe you see somebody else use the machine and it works. Then you might think about using that same machine again. But otherwise, you're not going to do it. So continuous reinforcement's good to establish kind of a link in the behavior you're looking for. So like if you're training a dog to sit on command, at the very beginning of the training, you probably want to reinforce every single time he does it correctly. But pretty soon into it, once he starts to get the hang of it, you're going to want to kind of alter it up just a bit. And that's where we get into not reinforcing every single correct response, but we're going to reinforce part of them. And that's what's called intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent. It's kind of like the little thing on your windshield wipers when you hit it to go like every 5 seconds or so, and you can change that about a little bit. So here we go. Let's talk about the first schedule. And that's fixed ratio. Okay, we already know the word ratio means number. Fixed means constant or set. So a fixed ratio means that reinforcement will occur after a set or constant number of correct responses. Okay, reinforcement's going to occur after a set or a fixed number of correct responses. Now, an example of a fixed ratio might be where you're getting paid by the job. Okay, you do a job, you get a certain amount of pay. Maybe you sew up T-shirts. You sew T-shirts together, and they say, hey, for every 5 T-shirts that you sow, you're going to get X number of dollars. Okay, it's a set amount that you have to do to get the reward. A fundraiser. A lot of times they'll say, hey, if you sell 10, you get a certain prize. If you sell 25, you get a different prize. If you sell 50, you get a bigger prize. That's a fixed or a set number of things you have to do to get that reward. Okay? That's a fixed ratio. Let's go to the next one, and that's fixed interval. Okay, we know interval is time period. Fixed means constant or set. So here we go. Reinforcement occurs after a set or constant time period. Okay, so we're going to wait a certain time period. Many of you, if you have a job, you probably don't get paid every single night. So, and that doesn't bother you because you know they told you at the very beginning that you're going to get paid every 2 weeks or you're going to get paid weekly. So it's on a set time period. That means that you're not going to go crazy if you go to work one night and you don't get a paycheck. Okay, you wait until the time period's up and then you expect your paycheck. All right, so being paid by the hour and things like that, you know, that's a certain time period that you're doing. Our grading period, we're on a fixed interval time period. We basically have a 9-week grading period. At the end of that 9 weeks, you get a reward in the form of the report card. Now, the thing about fixed interval schedules is that obviously, you think about it, this can lead to laziness and a lack of effort, especially early on in the interval or in the time period. If you think about schoolwork, a lot of people, the first 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks of school, they just kind of glide by. They don't really think too much about their grade. They don't work that hard because they've got a long way to go before they actually get to the reward. But one thing you're going to notice is the quicker, or the closer, I should say, the closer they are to the reward, the more effort they're going to put into it. So all of a sudden we get toward the very end of a grading period, and now you've got a whole bunch of people coming up asking, what's my grade? What do I have to do? Can I do a little bit extra to get a higher grade? That sort of thing. That happens in a fixed interval schedule. Let's talk about the next one here. The next one is a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. And once again, okay, variable means, well, ratio rather means number. Variable is the other word we have to learn here. Variable simply means random. In other words, you never know when you're going to get the reward. Okay, so reinforcement's going to occur after a random number of correct responses. Now, this gambling is based on this a lot of times. Gambling, a slot machine. Slot machines are actually programmed to pay out a certain amount, a certain percentage of what they take in. So, for example, if they bring in $1,000, they're programmed to pay out $600 to $700. So the gambling machine, the slot machine, is going to make money in the long run. It's just a matter of, who gets the money, who gets the payouts occasionally. You never know when that's going to happen. They call this machine the one-armed bandit for a reason. People get addicted to it. And that's one of the things that can happen with variable ratio schedules, is it becomes very habit forming. You never know for sure when the reward's coming, and you don't want to walk away from the machine. So unlike a Coke machine, where if you put your money in, hit a button, and it doesn't work, you immediately walk away, a slot machine, you may put $100 in a slot machine, never win a thing, and yet you can't walk away because you never know when it's going to give you the reward. And sure enough, if you walk away, the next person may come up and boom, they get the reward. And so because of that unknown factor, people tend to basically be very, very consistent in their activity there. And that's what you tend to see, is very consistent behavior there. Hunting. That's another thing that could be variable ratio. You never know. Like if you see, if you hunt deer and you're trying to shoot a deer, you won't necessarily shoot it on the first shot. It may take a second shot or a third shot or a fourth shot, and you may never hit it. Or you might hit it, but you never know. It's variable. It's random. Okay? Sales commission. If somebody works on sales commission, you never know when you're going to make that sale. Now, the thing is, if you don't approach a person, if you don't approach a customer, you're never going to make the sale. So it's also based on the number of customers that you talk to. You have to talk to customers to eventually make a sale. That's why it's random, but it's also based on the number of people or contacts that you have. If you look at these schedules, you probably figured out the last one, and that's going to be variable interval. And this is when reinforcement occurs after a random time period. A random time period. So this is a situation where it's something like pop quizzes. You never know when you're going to have a pop quiz. Could be today, could be tomorrow, it could be next week. You have no way of knowing. And it's based on a time period. It's not necessarily how many times that you're doing something. It's just it's totally random. If you dial your friend on the phone and you get a busy signal, you dial them again. You never know when they're going to pick up. Okay, it's a time period. It doesn't matter if you try 10 times or if you only try once to get them. If they're on the phone for a certain time period, you're still going to get that busy signal. So it's not based on how many times you attempt it. It's just based on a random time period. Okay? Fishing. If you go fishing, you never know when the fish is going to strike. Okay? You could be there for hours, you could be there for days and never get anything. Okay? You never know. So those are things that are based on variable interval schedules. What you end up with in that type of a behavior, again, is a relatively consistent, steady type of behavior. Okay? Anytime, here's something to remember, especially when we talk about extinction. Okay, how long is it going to take if you stop giving reinforcement for somebody to stop the behavior? Now, we said on a continuous reinforcement schedule, the pop machine, if somebody does something right and they don't get a reward, they're going to stop immediately. On a fixed schedule, they may continue doing the behavior for a time period, for a little bit longer, but they're not going to go on forever because they know that they're due a reward, and if they don't get that reward fairly soon, they're going to stop the behavior. But on a variable schedule, now it doesn't matter if it's ratio or interval, on a variable schedule, you never know when reinforcement's going to occur. Therefore, your behavior is going to be continuous. It's going to be constant. Okay? It's going to go on and on and on. If you want to train a dog to behave and to behave consistently, behave long term, you want to do it on a variable schedule so that they're never going to know for sure when the behavior is going to get reinforced. They're always going to do that behavior. Okay? These schedules of reinforcement, again, they're not that difficult, but the terminology, they look alike, sound alike, or at least very similar, but yet they mean very different things. Make sure you know all of these.